Yes, people, we are back for what I've decided actually is going to be the final installment of the beginners series, so that we can then progress on to more advanced techniques and stuff outside of this mini beginners series, which is now formed a great place for me to point people to if they're just starting out on flute, if they've bought one from me or anywhere else for that matter, such as this beautiful rose flute that I've just finished making for somebody, which I'm very proud of and plays beautifully. So to cap this series off then, two very, very basic tricks and piece of guidance so that we can just add a little bit more texture to our playing. And then I'm going to show you two ways that we can practice everything we've learned so far in this series, but have a little bit of a fun with it. It's a bit of an exercise, it's a bit of a self-led exercise which I'll demonstrate. So stay tuned for that. But first, those two tricks. First is tapping, and then we're going to go on to stepping. So these are actually some of the simplest things that you can do. When would I employ the tap? Well, just actually if I'm thinking of where to go next on the flute perhaps, and I would just want to add a slight pause and a tail off and then a pickup to even just one single note. So let me demonstrate what a long note would sound like, just so we know what we're talking about. So sometimes you might play that with a little bit of vibrato, etc. Throughout your flute playing, but sometimes you can add just a little tap just to give it a little bit more interest whilst you decide where you're going next. And it's a little bit of a pause. It's such a simple technique to do. And yes, I was tailing the breath off slightly. If you haven't seen the video on breath control, please go back to the previous video and have a little look at that. But so let's play that. Let's try the difference between tapping without tailing the breath off, like this, and the difference of doing that hard or soft even. So there's a few different ways. Actually, at the end there, you've got the more aggressive tap, where I'm covering each note on that tap. I'm tapping and I've got complete coverage of the whole, even though it's very, very brief and it's like a lifting as soon as you've placed your finger. If I'm to hover around half covered like this and make the same motion, it sounds more like this. Versus, so you can hear it's not announced as sharply, and you can do that repetitively so it turns into a flutter. But if you flutter without covering the whole hole, then it almost sounds a bit like a vibrato, which is done in the breath. So you can play around with the coverage of the whole and find the desired effect that suits your playing or where you are right now, and vary it, change it up, try all different ways of that tapping motion. I just tend to use it really when I'm thinking of navigating where to go, or if I've done that once, I'll probably introduce it a few times throughout my improvised playing on that particular time, just so it keeps that flow and it keeps coming back and it makes sense and it's got a place within the music that you're playing. So there you can see the tap, where I introduced it, just as a little bit more texture and a piece of interest throughout that. Stepping, let's get on to stepping. So stepping is really good, particularly as we've started to really get used to playing the full scale on the flute. So that's the most obvious full scale. There are advanced full scales that we'll get onto again in future videos, but essentially that is the scale that as beginners we would learn, the 5-hole pentatonic Native American style flute scale. Once we've started to nail that, and we are implementing the tips and tricks from these videos, these beginners tutorials, then we might navigate the flute something like this. The simplest form of playing. So what we're doing there though, and quite naturally because we've just learnt the scale, is we're moving one finger at a time in any direction. Wherever we're starting from, wherever we're finishing, we're just going one at a time up and down, and then just maybe utilising one of the notes twice and creating different rhythms, but essentially moving one note at a time. Stepping, we begin to move more than one finger at a time for greater variation and interest throughout the scale. So simple playing again, but just showing you how to step and how that might sound. So a lot of the time there I was either placing 2 down and lifting 1 up, or the other way around. So the way to practice that is to do it in the scale, and we'll all the way up the scale we'll lift 2 off instead of 1. So instead of going up the scale like this, we're going to go up the scale and we're going to put 1 back down, 2 up, 1 down, 2 up, 1 down, 2 up, 1 down. And we're going to do in reverse on the way back down. We'll go 1 up, 2 down, 1 up, 2 down, 1 up, 2 down, 1 up, 2 down. Hopefully if I get it right. But it's a great way of introducing this to our playing, and it just breaks the constriction of moving one at a time and gets us used to playing different sounds throughout the flute. We can go to, well, if that's called stepping, then let's call this jumping, where we might be brave enough to lift 3 off at the same time, just to get from one end of the flute to the other in a much quicker time, to add more drama perhaps. And that is actually this flute wetting out for the first time. I've been playing it quite a lot. Actually happens much less with my flutes, as I've devised a little well inside of here that gives you a good 10-15 minutes playing time, interestingly enough, rather than sometimes you pick up some flutes, particularly machine-made flutes perhaps, and they're wetting out all the time and people are shaking them left, right and centre, you know. But anyway, here we go. What was I going to do? Oh yeah, so we're going to do a jumping. So this is an advance on stepping, which is lifting 2 up or and just placing 1 back down, to jumping, and it just takes us from one end of the flute to the other really, really quickly. So you can see there a little bit of stepping, a little bit of jumping, and a little tiny pop at the end there. So they're the two tricks that I wanted to share with you today. One of them is a little bit of a trick, the tap, and I guess the stepping is more just to create a little bit more texture, drama, and variation into our playing rather than being an actual trick on any particular note. So great ways to introduce stepping is introduce it into the skill like that. And then I have two other exercises which you can create yourself, but they're brilliant. One is use as many tricks as you can throughout the entire scale. Take as many breaths as you want. You're going all the way up the scale and all the way back down. And we're trying to implement as many tricks as we've learned over the past few tutorials. So the pop, the slide, the flutter, the tapping, yeah, all of them if you can, all the way up and all the way down. And how many can you include in one of those actions? So in flute playing we call each breath, we call that a phrase. It's a phrase of expression through the flute. So let's not worry about how many phrases we use, but just go from the fundamental, the bottom, all the way up the scale, and see how many, if not all, of the tips and tricks that we can include. So I'll leave that up to you to have a go yourself and try, and particularly the ones that you're beginning to grasp, just trying to introduce them, and another one. So if you're really getting the hang of popping, or you're really getting the hang of sliding, for example, maybe introduce the other one into that. So at least you're getting two tricks in as you go up and then back down to the bottom of the flute again. See if you can get two, and then see if you can get three in there. The more and more you get used to doing these tricks, and then you'll begin to have a sound and a rhythm within just going up and down the basic skill. I'm sure, I can promise you it'll begin to evolve into an actual sound. And doesn't matter which order you do these in. Another great exercise to do is just to concentrate on one phrase, one actual phrase. How many, or just select your favorite two, and in one breath can you make a tune out of one breath? This is a really, really cool exercise. And so let's go. Try it yourself, see what you come up with. It might throw something up unexpected because you're under a little tiny bit of pressure to create something just in one move. It might throw something out that you weren't expecting, something to latch onto, something to add to your own improvised flute playing. What I'm really excited to do actually, and those two previous exercises there, challenges if you like, they will set you up for what's coming next, which will be how to break from the norm, how to introduce different things and ways of thinking into your improvised playing, because we all get stuck and end up resorting to what we always play. And there's a few very, very simple ideas of introduction of just new places and ways to approach that add a completely different sound to our existing playing, or changes it completely, changes the tempo, just chucks things up and sees where they fall most of the time as well. But they all help advance our own stuck you know, that place of being stuck with the Native American style flute, which we all get to. And yeah, even as you get more advanced, you'll have your favorite dittos and your go-to phrases, etc., etc. But having embraced what comes next in the next video, you'll have more and more of those to fall back onto and really add some stuff to your arsenal, and you'll get really much more comfortable with not knowing what's coming next as well, because you'll be like a full bag of tricks. So thank you so much. I hope that was helpful. That ends the mini series. Stay tuned for something new coming up next, and then in the next few weeks I'll also be talking about what Native American style flute means to me, the story, the backstory of where it all began for me, and yeah, it's definitely an interesting one, and this is an instrument that is very, very close to my heart, and actually I owe a lot to, so come back and have a little listen about that as well. As always, your likes and your shares and your comments, etc. of this video are more than welcome. If there's anything from any of the videos that I've done thus far in this mini series of beginners tutorials that you're not clear on, or it went too quickly for you, feel free to either comment or reach out to me personally. I'm actually going to take off my website I do have a little package on there to help people with one-to-one tuition online. That doesn't really appeal to me anymore. I see this, these free videos, these free sort of tutorials for people replacing that. Actually, teaching people full-time doesn't really inspire me. Actually, my flute making inspires me much more than that, and playing myself and doing everything, you know, in association with my shamanism as well. So I'm not trying to, you don't worry, I'm not trying to sell you more lessons or anything like that. Is kind of where I'm coming from. If you did want to reach out and you're getting stuck with something, it might be something that prompts a new video in future, or it's just something that I might be able to explain to you on a quick voice note or something like that. I'm more than happy to help. So yeah, just give me a shout if that's the case. Sending you all lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon.